There was a mother who once believed that love could protect her child from everything. She held him in her arms the day he was born and promised that no darkness in the world would ever touch him. She raised him with faith and kindness, taught him to see the good in people even when it was hard. She believed the world was broken but still worth loving, and that love was stronger than hate. She had no idea that one evening a single moment would shatter her world forever. The knock came at her door. A police officer standing in the rain, his face pale, his voice trembling. When he spoke, she felt the world stop. Her son had been shot outside a store. Wrong place, wrong time. Someone pulled a trigger and the world went silent. She dropped to her knees, the sound of her own heartbeat louder than the storm outside. She wanted to scream but no sound came out. Days passed in a blur of faces, flowers, whispers, prayers, and the kind of silence that eats through walls. She kept thinking maybe it was a mistake, maybe her boy would walk through the door smiling like he always did. She held his jacket close to her face and could still smell him, the detergent, the hint of cologne, the trace of sunlight and life. She kept asking God why her boy, why her only child. She wanted to hate someone, anyone, but hate felt too heavy to carry. One night she sat alone in his room, the streetlight falling through the window onto his empty bed, and she heard herself whisper, "I forgive." She didn't know why she said it. Maybe because hate would have killed her too, maybe because she couldn't let his memory drown in anger. Weeks later the police caught the man who shot her son. He was only 19, scared, hollow eyes like someone who had never known love. When she saw his face in court, she felt a storm rise inside her, grief, rage, pity, and something else, something she didn't understand. When she stood to speak, everyone expected her to curse him, to scream, to demand punishment, but her voice came out soft, shaking, and she said, "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because my heart can't live without peace." The courtroom froze. People stared. The young man began to cry. He couldn't look at her. The judge looked away, and for the first time since her son died, she felt the air move through her lungs, like life was still possible. Months turned into years, and she visited that young man in prison. She brought him books. She listened when he spoke about his childhood, about how he never knew his father, how the streets became his teacher. She saw the child behind his eyes, and something began to heal inside her. One day he asked her, "Why did you forgive me?" And she said, "Because my son would have wanted me to, because I don't want you to waste your life like I almost wasted mine." She started a foundation in her son's name, a place for young men to find guidance, to learn compassion, to choose a different path. She called it the House of Second Chances. Every wall painted with hope, every photograph of her son shining like light. She spoke at schools and churches, telling people that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom, that holding on to hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. She became a voice for mothers who lost their children to violence, for people who didn't know how to live again. She told them forgiveness is not forgetting, it's remembering without fear. One morning she received a letter from prison. The young man wrote that he had found faith, that he was studying counseling so that when he was released he could help others like him. She held the letter to her heart and cried, not the way she cried when her son died, but the way one cries when something lost has been found again. On the anniversary of her son's death, she went to the small park where he used to play. She sat under the old oak tree and whispered, "I did it, baby. I let go of the pain. I forgave him, and now I can breathe." She felt the wind move gently around her like arms she couldn't see. She smiled through her tears because she knew love never really dies, it only changes shape. The years passed. Her hair turned silver, her steps slower, but her heart lighter. She continued to visit prisons, to speak to lost souls, to remind them that even the darkest hearts can find light. One afternoon at a community center, a young man approached her, tall, clean-dressed, eyes filled with humility. It was him, the one who took her son. He had served his time and come to thank her. He said, "You saved my soul." She looked at him and saw not a murderer, not a monster, but a man reborn. She placed her hand on his cheek and said, "My boy would be proud of you." They stood there in silence, two lives bound by pain but freed by grace. When she walked home that evening, the sunset was soft golden, the air smelled like rain and peace. She looked up to the sky and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me that forgiveness is not about them, it's about finding your way back to yourself." That night she sat by her window, the light flickering on her face, and she realized she was no longer just the mother who lost her son, she was the woman who forgave his killer, and in doing so she had found her own salvation. She closed her eyes and smiled because somewhere deep inside she could feel her son smiling too, and the world for a moment felt whole again. Years passed and life moved like slow water through the cracks of time. She never forgot the day she met him again at the community center, his voice calm, his eyes filled with something she could only call peace. After that day they began to write letters to each other. Sometimes she would visit him when he spoke at youth programs. He would talk about choices, about pain, about how one mistake can change everything. He always said the woman who lost the most gave him the chance to find himself again. The city began to know their story. It was written in newspapers, filmed in small documentaries. People called her a saint. She always shook her head and said, "No, I am just a mother trying to make sense of my grief." Some people criticized her, said forgiveness was weakness, said she betrayed her son by showing kindness to the one who took him away, but she carried her truth like a quiet fire. She knew forgiveness was not about forgetting, it was about transforming what was broken into something that could heal. She told them, "My son's life was love, and I will not let hate rewrite his story." One afternoon they stood together at a youth center named after her son. He was speaking to a group of boys, lost and angry boys who looked like he once did. He told them how violence steals not only life but also purpose. He said, "I took something from this woman that I can never return, but she gave me something I never knew I needed, a chance to be good." They clapped and some cried. She looked at him and saw what her son might have become if he had lived strong, kind, determined to make the world better. Years later, when he finished his studies, he became a counselor working with troubled youth, and every time he sat with a boy on the edge of darkness, he carried her words in his heart. Forgiveness is freedom. One day he called her, said, "I want to show you something." She arrived at a small house, freshly painted, warm light spilling from the windows. He said, "This is the new center I opened in your son's name." She stepped inside and saw photographs of smiling children, paintings on the walls, hope everywhere. She couldn't stop the tears. He said, "You saved me, now we will save others together." She hugged him and felt the circle of pain finally close. As years drifted by, her body grew frail but her spirit brighter. One morning she sat on her porch watching the sun rise golden across the sky and thought of all the lives touched by her one act of forgiveness. She thought of her son, how his death became the seed of something greater than both of them. When she passed away, the community gathered to honor her. They spoke of her strength, her grace, her endless faith. The man she once forgave stood before the crowd, his voice breaking as he said, "She taught me that forgiveness is not a gift we give to others, it is a door we open for ourselves so that love can walk through." After her passing, he continued her mission. He named his own child after her son, and every time he told their story, he ended with the same words she used to say, "Love never dies, it just changes shape." And somewhere beyond the veil of this world, she watched with a gentle smile, her heart finally at rest, because she knew that through her forgiveness her son still lived. In every act of kindness, every life saved, every heart healed, and the world for once felt a little softer, a little kinder, because one mother chose love instead of hate, and the echo of her choice still whispered through the lives of everyone she touched. When she closed her eyes for the last time, the world grew quiet, but her heart did not stop. It only changed rooms. I was waiting for her in the light. I had watched her all these years from the place where pain ends and peace begins. I saw her cry in my room, holding my jacket, whispering my name into the night. I saw her sit and caught her hands, trembling, her heart breaking, and still she said, "I forgive." I saw her walk into the prison with kindness instead of hate. I wanted to reach down to touch her face, to tell her that I was proud, that her love was stronger than death. I saw the boy who took my life sitting alone in his cell, whispering her name like a prayer. I watched him change piece by piece, day by day. I watched him become what I never got to be, a man who understands what love means. I saw them both healing through the years, their lives weaving together like broken glass turned into a window for others to see light through. When she met him again after his release, I was there, the wind that touched her hair, the sunlight that warmed her shoulders. I stood beside them when they built that small house of hope, when children laughed in the rooms that carried my name. I felt alive again, not in body but in meaning. Every smile, every heartbeat in that place was a note in the song my mother began with her forgiveness. When she grew old, I stayed close. Sometimes she would sit on the porch and whisper, "I know you're here," and she was right. I was in the rustle of the leaves, in the warmth of the morning sun, in the peace that filled her chest. I was the whisper that said, "Mama, you did it. You turned loss into love. You turned death into life." When her soul finally crossed over, the light opened wide, and there I was. She looked at me not with tears but with joy. She said, "I missed you, my baby," and I said, "I never left." We walked together through the fields of light, and I showed her what she had created below, a world softer than before, hearts mended, children laughing, men and women learning that forgiveness is not surrender, it is strength. It is the bridge between pain and peace. She saw the man she forgave standing at the center, holding his own child and teaching him to be gentle, to be kind, to never raise his hand in anger, and she smiled because she knew the cycle was broken. Her love had rewritten the story. I took her hand and we watched the sun rise over the earth again. It glowed golden like her soul. She looked at me and said, "Do you see it, my son? The world is healing." And I said, "Yes, Mama, because you chose love over hate, and every time someone forgives another, the world becomes a little more like heaven." And then we walked deeper into the light, her laughter soft like wind, her heart free like wings, and the earth below shimmered with a gentle peace, because one mother dared to forgive, and in that forgiveness she taught the world how to live again.